Hey guys, today I wanted to talk to you guys about shooting my first wedding on the Sony Fx3. Everything in this video will be my experience coming from the a7 III as well as sometimes shooting on a Canon EOS R6 occasionally. For the entire day I only shot on the Sony G Master 24-70 version 1. For the detail shots, as well as one shot of the bride and her bridesmaids, I did use the a7 III with a Leica 35mm Summicron f2 lens, but that was only for the details. I did want to shoot on that lens a little bit more throughout the day, but I just kind of got distracted because I was also using a vintage camcorder, and I just got distracted by all the things that happened throughout the wedding day. Overall, my experience with the image quality was exceptional. Obviously, the Fx3 is a phenomenal video camera, and I shot everything at 4K 24 frames per second at Cine EI, base ISO of 800, and S-Log3. So sometimes on the a7 III, I wouldn't necessarily use S-Log2 or S-Log3 because it was only 8-bit of color. So I never really had to worry about a depth of field with my variable ND. However, with the Fx3, I used the Peter McKinnon 2 to 5 stops of variable ND, and there were several times throughout the day while getting my exposure properly because of how harsh the sun was, I did have to drop my f-stop down a couple clicks in order to get correct exposure. So maybe I just need to get a higher density neutral filter for that particular situation. Honestly, I think with me having a little bit more time learning how to color grade S-Log3 Cine EI properly, I'm gonna be super impressed with the results that I get out of this camera. It is pretty simple to color grade this far, but I know that I'm not a colorist, so right now I just know the basics in getting a good color out of this sensor. The workflow of this camera was super easy. I felt like throughout the entire wedding day, I probably shot for about 7, maybe 7.5 hours throughout the day with a 30 to 45 minute intermission for dinner time. I didn't have to worry about toasts. I didn't have to worry about speeches. I did, however, record the audio with external recorders for the private vow and letter readings, as well as the first look with dad and the first look with the bride and groom, but that did not go into the Sony. I did all of that externally. Really, my only complaint about the Fx3 is that I did notice that compared to the a7 III on a wedding day, I burned through batteries. Thankfully, I have 4 batteries in my book bag, and I always had a battery on the charger just in case, but it seemed like I just burned through about 3 batteries in that time that I was filming the wedding, and typically on the a7 III, I would never go through more than 2 batteries in an entire day of shooting a wedding film. So with the dynamic range, compared to the EOS R6, shooting in C-Log3, I did notice a big difference in dynamic range. However, compared to the a7 III, I didn't really even notice a huge difference in dynamic range. Where I did see the Fx3 really shine with the dynamic range though was during the reception. So I typically light my reception scene with a NAN light that I'm actually using right here as my key light. It's a 60-watt NAN light, and I usually put that on the opposing side to where I'm shooting the reception. I'll usually stick it in a corner, and on my camera itself I have this little hot shoot battery powered LED that I always usually have it on the highest intensity possible, and I get a really good clean exposure across my whole reception dance floor. And I did notice a big difference in dynamic range for the reception with the Fx3. There were several shots where I shot handheld on the Fx3. I thought that I could actually get away with that because of how good the in-body image stabilization was. I'm really old school when it comes to stabilization. I don't typically shoot on a Ronin during a wedding film because I just find it feeling very plasticky, and for me it just kind of steals the joy out of creating with a camera whenever I have a computer kind of doing all the work for me. There are also some clips that I used probably a 10-year-old HD 2000 Steadicam. I just find it where there's already so many batteries where I'm having to worry about external recorders having batteries. I'm having to worry about the cameras using batteries, my LED lights using batteries, my key light using batteries. So I just find it more simple having one less thing to worry about with batteries, and that is my glide cam. So overall, I was pretty nervous about shooting on the Fx3 because I'm not super familiar with exposing properly for S-Log3, but after learning about the histogram and how powerful that is with kind of overexposing really high to where you can see all your highlights clipping and then bringing your exposure back down, I actually found that way more helpful than the exposure meter on the Fx3, and I didn't really have any shots where I actually blew out any of my highlights. There was one particular scene where we were shooting and there was this insane cloud that kind of came over the sun, and that unfortunately did sort of bring all of my shadows into underexposure, but I was still able to recover a pretty decent image, even though it was probably 1 or 2 stops underexposed. I felt like having some experience with the Canon EOS R6 exposing for C-Log 3. It was very similar. I used the histogram on that camera as well, but the one big key difference is that whenever you're shooting on the Fx3, the histogram will actually stay on your screen whenever you're recording, and so I found that very, very helpful when exposing for my highlights. And always as a backup plan, because I felt so nervous, that's why I brought my A7 III. Just in case I wanted to jump ship and not shoot on the Fx3 anymore, I could always fall back to what I felt more comfortable shooting, and that was the A7 III. And that was in my book bag all along, but thankfully I didn't have to do that. So I think having some experience with the Sony A7 III ecosystem, as well as exposing C-Log 3 on the Canon, the learning curve for the Fx3 was actually pretty easy for me. I still have a long way to go with this camera, and I'm very eager to continue to learn more about this sensor and how to expose in different particular situations, but I'm still just so happy about this camera, and I can't wait to shoot more weddings, more commercial content, as well as more client work in the future. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.